It is that time.
Hey, everybody.
Mr. England.
Mr. Dancy. How are you?
Seems like just yesterday we were doing a video interview as I was starting this little company in 2008 called ServiceSphere.
Yes, I remember it well.
Yes, I remember that well. Video technology is a...
And the evidence is on YouTube.
Yeah, yes, it is. I should post that video. I don't think people realize we go that far back. Video technology hasn't come that much farther since then, has it?
No. Hey, let me put my cool glasses on. You were giving me a hard time about this the other day, so there we go.
No, they're not cool. They just make you. They don't make you look
like this decade.
Yeah, they're not as skeptical. Here, I'll put on my trendy hip glasses since you have those on.
Hey, look at that.
We don't need that. So you have done something remarkable, and we're going to take a look at that presentation. But if there's someone who doesn't know you, because we have lots of new viewers who don't even know about service management or our space or IT support in that general, tell people who you are a little bit, and then we'll get right in your presentation, and I'll disappear.
All right. Well, I live in little old Wellington, New Zealand, so we're doing the global time zone mind bender here with the fact that this is a US time zone broadcast, but I'm actually in New Zealand where the whole thing started however many hours ago.
2022.
Yeah, so I'm just about to have my breakfast when we're done here tomorrow, Thursday. And I'm an IT consultant and commentator down here, but I'm best known to the international audience for my blog, the IT Skeptic, which has a devout following and takes a skeptical view on all things IT and ITSM in particular. Yeah,
and literally all things IT. I mean, you tackle all subjects. And you also publish a newsletter called The Skeptical Informer?
Yep, which came out last night after a quiet week.
Yeah, I'm always afraid when they hit my inbox, like it's some type of subliminal subtext that fix your game, Dancy. Whenever I see that Skeptical Informer, my ego says, he's talking to you.
I don't think so this time.
Oh, this time. So there have been times. Okay, we got it on air. We have it on air that you send me messages through your community.
Hey, just because you're not paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you. You know.
Okay. So let's go ahead and get you online here. And why don't you go ahead and bring up your presentation, and then I will step back and witness the magic.
Oh, bring up my presentation. The technology's easy, right?
Yeah.
How's that look?
It looks amazing.
There we go. Shall I begin?
See you when you're done.
So, hello everybody and around the world. This is a presentation about Standard+Case, a universal model for service response, which sounds a bit grand, but it's a really exciting topic for me, and people who follow the blog know that it takes quite a bit to get the IT skeptic all fizzy and evangelical about something, but for once I'm not being skeptical here. I'm promoting an idea to you that I think has real value and real benefit to the ITSM community, to the IT community as a whole. So let's see what you think by the time I'm done. This approach, this Standard+Case approach to service response, is not seeking to replace our existing ITSM theories, our existing ideas. It's there to clarify and expand the theory. So we're building on the shoulders of others, as we should, and seeking to add to things like ITIL. It's about improving our performance in how we deal with responses to anything, incident, problem, change, request, of course, even event, anything that needs a human response. It's about improving our performance to that, getting better in efficiency and effectiveness, how quickly and how well we do that stuff. We're talking about empowering knowledge workers here. Now, one of the common criticisms of service management in general, and ITIL in particular, is that it doesn't empower knowledge workers, that in this modern decade where people are expected to be more professional, more expert, and to be self-empowering and self-managing, that our process-centric approaches like ITIL put people into a box, constrain them, limit their creativity, stifle their ability to apply their own expertise to solving the situations that they're faced with. And so Standard+Case goes quite a way towards addressing that criticism of our existing approaches by empowering knowledge workers to work as knowledge workers where it's appropriate, as you'll see. And so therefore we would hope that it's going to improve the morale of the people who work in response. And in the IT world, sometimes they're pretty unhappy people, right? So we're going to improve their performance. We're also going to change the way we measure performance, as I'll mention, to acknowledge some of the situations that people face. So we'll empower them. So, you know, this has got to be something that improves the morale of the people doing that work. And hey, we empower the customer, which is an interesting thing. So another common criticism of service management in general and ITIL in particular is that the customer is constrained to engage with us only through whatever our processes have defined, and that's equally limiting to the customer and to our ability to serve the customer. So Standard+Case empowers the customer to do more and to ask for more, and for us to be able to deal with that. Now, in order to understand Standard+Case, let's talk a little bit about the concepts of standard and of case, and then we'll bring them together. And to talk about standard, let's go right back to first principles and have a look at what I call a generic response process. So this process is the one that's inherent, that's underpinning all of our processes that we have in service management for responding to anything. So our generic process is that we receive a ticket, as a nice general term for it, and we record it in our ticketing system. We categorize and prioritize it, and then based on that categorization we determine who to assign it to. They resolve it, or they might assign it to someone else until it's resolved. Eventually we resolve the ticket, and when it's complete we go into a step to close it off, to make sure the data's all good, make sure all the right things were done, make sure that the original person opening the ticket confirms that it's resolved. Yeah. So this should be familiar. Excuse me. Should be familiar as a general process that we do all the time for all sorts of tickets. Now, ITIL has a term of standard models for resolving tickets. So ITIL talks about standard requests, standard incidents, standard changes. It even implies there are standard problems as well. So a standard model is a predefined template of some sort, a script or whatever the tool supports, but it's a standard template for how to resolve certain types of tickets. So, you know, if you get a request, you recognize that it's a standard request, and then you follow the dancing ball, you follow the magic footsteps to just work through that template and resolve it. Yeah. Standard change has a special meaning of being pre-approved as well as predefined, but in general, standard models are predefined templates for executing model workflow to resolve any sort of ticket. Okay, so that's the term, that's the sense in which I'm using the term standard. It's coming from that ITIL usage of standard models. So we've got these things called standard models. Now, the other half of the story is about case. And case management is a body of knowledge just like service management is a body of knowledge. And case management is a generic body of knowledge, just like service management is a generic body of knowledge. You can use service management in any context you want, not just IT. So, you know, you probably know that we use, or that others use service management in other arenas than just information technology. Now, in the same way, case management is about dealing with cases, and it's used in a number of sectors. It's used in the sense of medical cases, criminal cases, legal cases, social work cases, and others, right? So anyone who's worked in those sectors is familiar with the term case, and probably familiar with the term case management, the management of those cases. And the same principles, the same generic case management body of knowledge can be applied to other things like audits and emergency responses and even battlefield situations. Case management is the study of how we deal with those cases. Now, case management is quite different to how we normally think of dealing with situations in service management with our very process-centric approach to that. Case management is about being presented with a case that's in a certain state and gathering information to do diagnosis to determine what the current state is, and then deciding what state we want to get it into, and then looking at our options for actions to get to that new state, and then selecting one of those actions or sets of actions, and then deciding what resources we need in order to perform that, and then getting to a new state, and then reassessing our situation with more information to decide the next state, and so on and so on. And so working our way through a sequence of states trying to get to a goal. And even that goal might change as we move to a new state. And we don't have complete control over the state because external information can come in and change the whole game. So, for example, police, you know, get called to a dead body, and so they start arranging for the undertaker to come and get the body, and they, you know, start making inquiries and so on. If they discover a bullet hole in the body, then the whole state changes. They've gone from just a death to a murder, and so now they need to get completely different resources deployed and perform different actions and quite possibly have a different goal now. So, you know, this is the world of the caseworker, is dealing with situations that are unpredictable. So let's have a look at it. It's a series of execution states. The states are determined dynamically. External events can change the state. There are options for action at each state. The actions are chosen dynamically. Even the inputs and outputs are decided dynamically. What information and other, you know, inputs do we need now for this state, and what should we be producing? That's changed and decided on the fly. So too is what resources will we deploy to help us do this, and so the states and actions are unpredictable, and this is really important. You can't pre-model what sequence of states they're going to go through, or even what states there will be. You cannot predict all the possible states that the caseworker is going to have to deal with. Even the goals can change as the case develops. So planning is part of execution. You can't pre-plan everything for case management. This is pretty different, right, to the sort of world that we think of when we're doing service management and we're planning our request management. I hate the term request fulfillment. Our request management, activities and templates and so on. Now, I think that if you take the idea of standard models and the idea of case management, and you bring the two together, you come up with the Standard+Case model, which is a universal approach to dealing with responding to anything. Standard+Case says there's either a standard model, in which case we'll use the standard approach, or there isn't, in which case we're doing case management. So yin and yang, right? The two are very different, as we've already started to talk about, and I'll talk about more in a minute. And they're quite complementary. They're almost opposites of each other. And when you bring them together, you complete the circle. You come up with this holistic theory for how you would deal with responses to anything. One of the analogies I use here is I'm betting a fair percentage of the audience on this call have been programmers, or at least hacked some code at some stage in your lives. And so if you have, you'll be familiar with that situation where a program says, is it one of these? No. Well, is it one of these? No. Well, is it one of these? No. Oh dear, that's all I know about. So I've fallen through all my logic. You have a routine at the bottom which goes, help, we've got to here and we don't know what to do. That's directly analogous to how we do service management. If you think about it, that's how we that's how we do the whole request management, incident management, any of those things. That the poor operators got this set of standard models for how they deal with certain situations when a request comes in, and if they get to the end of those requests and they're sitting there going, you know, I don't know what to do now, then they wing it. They ad hoc, they ad lib, they work out how am I going to deal with this situation, and they do that. They're doing case management. They don't know it. We don't label it as that, but that's what they're informally doing already. Now, what Standard+Case is saying is, let's not just informally do that. Let's take this whole body of knowledge called case management and let's apply some techniques and some structure and some formality and all the ideas that are there, and let's measure it as case and let's improve it as case. Let's put some formalism around this thing. Yeah. So that's what Standard+Case is doing. So going back to that process that I had initially, then that generic process, what we're saying is there's a branch in there that when you go to select the model, to select the template for how to deal with this response, if there isn't a model one there, then you branch into case management. And it's deliberately drawn as a fuzzy cloud because it's, you know, there's no process in this stuff. That's pretty scary for your standard service management person. There's no process. It's unpredictable. And so we're only branching for the resolve step of that generic process. The rest of it, the generic process is still there, but in the resolve step, no model, I go away from process, go into case management, okay? Have you heard of the Kinfering Model? Now, I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is an interesting model to help understand the different spaces in which standard and case would operate. Now, the Kinfering Model says that there are four sort of domains to any situation or problem or state that you're dealing with. They're either simple, complicated, complex, or chaotic, or there's a fifth state in the middle of disorder where no one knows what's going on, and hopefully it sort of resolves into one of the four. And I've also heard the terminology for the top two of exploratory or exploitative states: simple, exploitative, exploratory, chaotic. So what these states are, the simple state is it's known. We know what to do, so we do it. The complicated or exploitative state, it's knowable. With our existing techniques and knowledge and tools and stuff, we can go out and know more and deal with it. So we need to exploit our existing capabilities to deal with the complicated situation. In the complex or exploratory domain, it's unknown, and we have to go out and explore and get enough information to create the techniques and the tools and the knowledge to be able to deal with the situation. And chaotic is anarchic, it's out of control, it's unknowable. I've also introduced the term in the Standard+Case world, like I'm working on a book at the moment, so I'm using this term in the book, of unknown and unfamiliar. So, you know, we get a situation and we don't have enough information to know whether it's one of our standard models, or we do have enough information to know, and we know it's not. It's an unfamiliar one that we don't have a model for. So the theory, the Kinfering body of theory says that in a simple state, you sense, categorize, respond. Now, doesn't that sound pretty familiar to what we just talked about with our generic process? In the complicated domain, you sense, analyze what you learned, and then respond based on what you analyze. In the complex world, you probe and then sense and then respond. So you go out and get and then sense and respond. And in the chaotic, you just act and then you sense what's going on and respond accordingly. So the Kinfering model gives us ideas on the different ways we should be behaving in each of these different domains. Another way, and what's interesting to me is that if you look at the axes of this model, then the left-hand side you could say are the uncontrolled domains, and the right-hand side are the controlled domains. And the bottom half is where you just act, and the top half is where you think before you act. And yet another way of looking at Kinfering is to look at the social interconnections, the groupings of people. So in the simple domain, it tends to be hierarchical, centrally controlled. We know what to do. There's somebody in charge. They're telling people what to do. In the complicated domain, it's still centrally managed, but we tend to have local groups who are tightly connected using their various areas of expertise to deal with the situation. And this, to me, sounds very similar to the way we escalate tickets up through level 1, 2, 3 support, for example. Then in the complex domain, it's not centrally managed, it's collaborative. So lots of interconnections, people working together, trying to explore, understand the situation, get enough information to deal with it in order to resolve it. And that sounds very like a war room for problem management to me. And then in the chaotic situation, you've got loosely coupled individuals trying to deal with the chaotic situation and get some control over it, which sounds to me very like a major incident. So this is another way of viewing that Kinfering model. So now if we apply that to what we've been talking about, you've got this command layer at the bottom where people are just doing and directing, and you've got a collaboration layer at the top where people are interacting and collaborating in order to deal with the situation. So it seems to me that what I'm talking about with the standard models where we've got predefined templates is that simple domain. And the case stuff applies at the top where we're doing all the collaborative behaviors to deal with complicated or complex situations where we can't just pull a standard model out to react to it. And case, as I said, talks about unknown and unfamiliar. Unknown, we don't know enough to know what model we should be using, or unfamiliar, we know enough to know that none of our models fit. So let me just compare the two for you and show you the yin and yang quickly. Standard situations are ones where it's routine, it's predictable, repeatable, it's pre-planned by the designers of the process, it's performed by trained process workers who are trained on all those templates. It revolves around a procedural sequence of steps. That's the fundamental definition, is the BPM, the business process modeling of it. And part of that also is the transfer between people and groups of responsibility, escalation in ITIL terms, horizontal and vertical. It's controlled by the process designer who pre-controls it by designing what it's going to do, and by the owner who controls it at runtime. It can and should be process modeled, and it should be defined and pre-documented. So therefore, they're candidates for automation. Now, my views on automation we can talk about some other time, but there are appropriate times for automation, and the kind of thing you automate is stuff that's routine and predictable and high payback from automation. It's also candidates for analysis and optimization using statistical observation. Statistics and observation, that's your Taylorism, your time and motion studies, looking at the overall flow of the tickets. But it's fragile and unknown exception conditions. Doesn't like handling the unfamiliar or the unknown. Case, on the other hand, every case is unique, they're non-repeatable, they're unpredictable, The plan and workflow are emergent. They unfold as the case goes along. You don't know what the plan is before you start, and it'll change before you finish. I like the military saying that no plan survives the first encounter with the enemy. And the same with the workflow. You won't know what sequence of tasks and who beforehand. It's performed by knowledge workers, people who are expert, skilled, experienced people. It revolves around knowledge as the central definition of what's going on and the central controlling resource. And it's about collaboration between people more than transfer. It's controlled by the participants at runtime. It cannot be process modeled. It's documented as the case proceeds, so therefore you can't automate this stuff. You can automate fragments that are repeated, but you can't automate cases. You can analyze and optimize it not by statistical summary so much, a little bit, but not really. You need to review case by case and understand what happened in each case and what we can learn from that. And case management is very robust in the face of unknown exception conditions. That's pretty much what it's for. So look at that, yin and yang, complete mirror images of each other. So let's look at some of the implications of this, the people implications. Standard+Case is about a lot of the funky things, if you like, that people talk about in the modern IT world, that people talk about as the things that are desirable in our modern world, things that people talk about as criticisms of ITIL and of service management. So Standard+Case is saying that when we're dealing with these cases, with these non-standard situations, we need to be collaborative and use collaboration tools and communicate a lot and work together to explore and understand the situation and resolve it. We need to empower our knowledge workers. We need to give them permission to be knowledge workers, permission to go outside standard process and to acknowledge that that's what they're doing. So this is fundamental stuff to move us forward from a lot of the negative aspects of what we've been doing in service management that people haven't really liked up till now. That's pretty cool. It's very important that we build the skills of these people and to equip them to deal with the cases that they're managing, and that we motivate them. I think they're going to be, I think people are highly motivated who are caseworkers, but we certainly need to make sure they're motivated, because we're going to be setting them free to determine their own course, and we want to make sure that they're doing the best and the right things. That's pretty cool. One of the aspects that's really cool that comes out of this is gamification, and I'd love to talk about gamification of the service desk, but I don't really have time today. But this is the application of game theory to things like request management. And so if you think about the Standard+Case model and how it would work in a gamification context, we could rank the standard models by difficulty or risk. So we've got all these models for different categories of standard ticket, rank them, give service desk analysts or whoever your response workers are training in each model, and people get a badge for being certified in each different model. They get the Boy Scout badges, right? However you put those on their workstation or on their online profile or wherever, you have badgeification, acknowledging people's skills and experience that grows over time. And some models we would prefer they be executed by a certified staff member, and some models that would be mandatory they be certified for stuff like security updates and so on. And so you start to get a filtering of the newbies do certain standard models, and the people who've been there a while and have increased their skill set and got the badges, got the stripes on their arm, they're the ones who can do the more advanced and difficult categories of standard models. Yeah, so we're giving people a bit of a career path as a response worker to acknowledge as they move forward and as they build their skill set. And then we could level up using the gaming language that you've got to get case certified. You've got to have enough experience and enough of all the other badges and some other sort of certification to say you're now a case worker and you can deal with the non-standard tickets, the ones that don't have a standard model for them. And so now when you first come on a service desk, you're going to spend a lot of your time doing Active Directory updates, but that's good because that's all you know how to do, and you're not getting big gnarly cases handed to you on day one and say, here, go work on this. And once you've been on the service desk for a long time, you know that you're going to very seldom be doing Active Directory updates because that's the sort of stuff the newbies do, and you're going to be doing all the chunky, interesting stuff. So people, now let's look at practices or process, or I like to say practices. So the process is emergent, as I said, it's not predefined. We embrace diversity. We want caseworkers to explore. We want them to find better ways of doing things, and then we want to jump down to the review point. We want to unravel afterwards to see what they did do and learn from it and see if there are new and better ways of doing stuff. It's very knowledge-centric. I've talked about that, bringing knowledge to the center of what we do, which is what we've been trying to do for years anyway. Policy and controls are really important for case management. If you're going to set people free, if you're going to empower them, then for their own protection, to be fair to them and for the protection of the organization as a whole, you need to set the rules and bounds. They need to be clear on what they can and can't do as a caseworker, what they can and can't do resolving a case. We need to set very clear bounds and very clear guidelines and rules for what to do and how to do it and what not to do. That's only fair on the people so they don't get their butt kicked later on for doing what they thought was the best thing in the situation. We've got some existing tools that we can bring to bear on our practices here. Remember I said you don't get many standard problems? You know, I'm sure occasionally you do. Yep, we know that problem. Here's how you fix that one. Go and do it. But a lot of the time, problem management is about case management. And so a lot of our existing thinking around problem management is going to bring tools and techniques to bear to help us with cases. Particularly stuff like root cause analysis, right? KCS, Knowledge Center Support, is another important approach or technique or methodology that's going to contribute a lot to what we do, obviously, and also Kanban to manage the workload of cases flowing through the system. I think Kanban's interesting and a good technique to look at for that. So going back to my picture of that generic model now with a branch in it to do case management in the resolve step, there is a feedback loop there. So as you're working on a case, you might get enough information to go from unknown to familiar and say, ah, this is one of these standard situations after all, pop back and go back and do the top flow across there and execute the model workflow. But there's a bigger feedback loop, which is much more interesting, and that's this one. So as we're executing a case, we create case records, we gather information as we go along, and we have this review step. We're not very good at reviewing in IT in general. We have to get better at it for case management because the value is all in reviewing some, or not necessarily all, but some of the cases and capturing the interesting information about what happened and how was it resolved and was that good and was it bad and could we do better, and improving our case management techniques as part of that review. But also, this is the big loop going back here, is that as we're reviewing, we might say, hey, we're getting a lot of these. This is how you resolve it. Select the best practice from all our cases, the best way it was resolved. Bottle that up as a standard model, template, and shove it into the rack of standard models. So the next time one of these happens, it won't be handled as case management, it'll execute it as a model workflow. And that feedback loop allows us to adapt. So there was a guy in Australia who was talking about how he built a request catalog for his organization, and when it went live, only 40 or 60%, I think 60% of the incoming requests were actually in the catalog. And so there are all these questions asked about what's wrong with your catalog that it only deals with 60% of reality. But that is reality, right? Is that we get non-standard requests. We just do. No matter how good you think your business analysis is, and no matter how quickly you get the thing live after you've finished your analysis, there will be things come along. Users just ask for non-standard things, and new services pop up that Service Desk knew little about, and suddenly we start getting these requests for a new service. Or you get the whole BYOD thing, and people just start turning up at work with an iPad 7 and saying, you know, connect me. So we have to adapt to changing circumstance in the world, and this is a mechanism for doing that. That when non-standard stuff just starts popping up in our face, we case manage it. But as we case manage it, we use our records and our review process to capture that and create standard models for the future. Now, things and technology, those of you who follow the IT Skeptic will know that I get bored witless by technology. So I'll try and sound interested, and I'll try and talk a little bit about the implications of this stuff. Resources are essential to... Thank you, Chris. Resources are essential to caseworkers. We need to give them as much as possible to help them get their job done. So we'll have all sorts of rich resources. Ticketing, well, we got those already. Ticketing systems. Workflow, there is an interesting technical implication here that workflow needs to be adaptable at runtime. So the caseworker needs to be able to add and remove tasks and change the flow and so on at runtime in your tool, if it's going to be a workflow tool to support case management. And checklists, I'm really passionate about checklists, and there's a URL here to a site where I've got some service management checklists up already. We're going to need good case management checklists in terms of the sort of inputs you ought to be getting, the outputs you ought to be producing, and the things you ought to be doing during a case. We're not going to tell you what order, but you better be checking them off as you go. So checklists will be important too. Tools, knowledge management tools, content management tools, collaboration and communication tools. We need records of our collaboration. So we need tools that are capturing historic records of how we collaborated and communicated, not just stuff like Twitter that loses it over time. And ticketing tools, which we've got. So that's cool. So, Standard+Case. I think it's really interesting. I think it's quite exciting. I think the implications for service management are pretty big of this stuff. We're clarifying and expanding the existing theory. We're standing on the shoulders of others to see further. We're improving performance, how quickly and effectively we respond to things by not just muddling around when we fall into that end state of we don't have a standard model for this. We're going to formalize and improve our techniques for dealing with all those situations that are the cases. We're going to empower our knowledge workers, improve the morale of the people, the responders, and empower the customers to come up with these non-standard requests and just deal with them. Say, yeah, we'll deal with that as a case. We'll look at that and see what we can do for you, Mr. Customer. Sure, you can ask that. Standard+Case. It applies to anything, think about this, anything that requires a human response. There's either a standard response or there isn't. There you go. What do you think of that, Mr. Dancy?
Well, I love it. I shared in the that little group we've got with 600 people in it on Facebook. Not 10,000 people casually selling products, but 600 people. To see this presentation, you would have had to have been in Australia or somewhere in the Nordics, or how many countries have you done this in?
Not that many yet. Australia and New Zealand. No, I talked about it at Pink, remember?
Yeah.
But not as a keynote, just as a session. Yeah.
So I mean, this is to me, this is a big deal because, again, this is one of those things you have to be part of. You know, I'm going to sound crazy, but you have to be part of an elite group of people to have had seen and been part of this. You want some feedback from Twitter?
Sure. What are they saying?
What are they saying? Who knows? You know those people on Twitter. So let me work my way up. So obviously there's some type of romance going on between a lady in France and you, but we'll leave that alone. So first thing someone said was, you know, this is their favorite session as far as their career development was concerned.
Okay.
As a competence, and this was mentioned somewhere the other day. Is IT service management a competence? I think that was the way they phrased it.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're like me. You don't forget. Standard and Case, how do you see this fitting into everything? Is this something that will evolve? Will there be books? Will Exxon be selling it in a year? What are we looking at here?
I don't know. We interviewed Fred Luddy for the ITSM weekly, our ITSM Antipodean podcast last night, and
he's my former boss.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I said nice things about you. So he got asked in that and in a webinar he did earlier. Where do you see us being in 5 or 10 years? And it's trying to see the future, man. I mean, I know you try and do it, but where's this going to go? Who knows? It could become a formal thing, a whole new sort of methodology, or we could just quietly absorb case management into service management and just acknowledge it more and structure it more. As I said, we're doing it now, and mostly in problem, but also in incident and request and change. We're dealing with the cases. This is just formalizing what we're doing. So it could just quietly get absorbed into service management, and maybe ITIL 4 will have a section on case management. Or it could get bigger than Ben-Hur, and someone will wrap it up and turn it into, a more formal product. I'm doing a book just as a sort of introductory guidebook that I'm trying to get out sort of early next year if I can. Unfortunately, nasty work keeps getting in the way, but so that's the near term. There could be certification in this stuff. Incidentally, you can certify in case management now. Unfortunately, you need to be a registered nurse to do that. So I decided that I would forego becoming a registered nurse in order just to become a certified caseworker.
Yeah, I've worked with caseworkers on a lot of levels.
Don't go there.
Dude, come on. See, 22 hours. I'm about to fall apart here. So, question for the IT skeptic: is the standard case model different between in-house support and outsourced support?
I don't think the model is different. But go back to that gamification thing. Who you certify to be your case workers will be the interesting thing. Do you have your outsourced support provider only doing your standard stuff, and cases come back in-house? I think would be the interesting question. Or do you trust and is your external provider sufficiently certified that you would permit them to deal with the cases as well? And we see that all the time, that you get the overseas call center and they go through all their standard questions and they go, oh, I can't help you, we'll get back to you, and then the next person who calls you is a local.
So I've been told to advise you that the US MBOC, and we actually have a sound for US MBOC. Let me see it. It was the US MBOC siren. But apparently the US MBOC books can be seen over your shoulder. There's a quest, well, not really.
Right alongside ITIL 2011.
Yes.
And COBIT, yeah. My three main references.
Somebody made a reference to, I'm sorry, Adam Mason made a reference to, would love to see some cold case files for IT. And then is Kanban applicable process, where is and uncord in standard and case?
Well, let's come back to the cold case, right? One of the things that I got to the end there and I thought I didn't mention is the measurement and reporting of Standard+Case. So at the moment, you get your butt kicked every time the report runs. What are all these long-running incidents that you guys are so incapable of resolving? And it's seen as a really negative thing that there are incidents open for 3 months. But it might just be that they're really, really gnarly incidents that it takes that long to resolve. And they are moving from state to state. There's progress, but we can't fix it. And this whole idea that all priority 2 incidents will be resolved within 3 days is just rubbish, because you can only forecast how long it'll take to resolve a standard thing. And all your non-standard cases, you can't be forecasting what's going to happen, so you can't forecast how long it's going to take, and you can't measure people negatively on how long it's taking, so long as they're making progress. So, you know, I think cold cases are important. We do have cold cases. We have problems that have been sitting there for forever and that we've decided are insoluble, just like a cold case for a copper.
It wouldn't be appropriate if so are you familiar with the schedule after you today?
Yeah.
So up after you, of course, we've got Ian Clayton closing out hour 24. But right after you is Richard White. Richard White is the CEO of User Voice, and had a video. You seem to enjoy this video.
I loved it, Chris.
I'm
you know,
sure
I loved it.
Yes, I know you did. So yes, I am trying to virtually set up a cage fight live here online. So actually, I know both of you. You both have a lot more in common than you think. Before we wrap up, through the filter of Chris Stancy and watching all this stuff in TFT, there are people who say Rob England is just contrarian. No matter what the point, he's just contrarian. I know Rob England. I know the IT Skeptic. You've talked about the difference between the two before. I see you embrace and use and extend a lot of technology. And I relate the most when you humanize it back to your son. And I won't say his name on purpose, so I don't think I'm being insensitive. What role do you see technology playing in your son's life in 10 years?
I wish I knew. I wish I knew. See, because as you know, I'm not contrarian. You know, a skeptic.
I said through the lens. It was not.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You know, a skeptic is about seek the evidence, and if the evidence is there, then you embrace it. Just like I think I've shown that I've done with Standard+Case, right? I'm open to innovation where I think I can see the evidence, and the same with technology. So I'm all open to technology, and the son is immersed in technology in ways that even a geek like me is not. I think I keep up with them more than some parents do, and I'm greatly concerned for the parents that have no idea what their children are doing. Whereas Jack and I, whereas the son and I, you know, we Minecraft together and we build stuff together, and so we do share a few virtual worlds that we're immersed in, and so I hope to continue that going forward. But they live in a weird world, and I just wouldn't want to guess what it's going to look like in 5
10 years is not
time.
10 years is not that far away.
No, I know, but look at the rate it's happening. I was watching Space Station USA or whatever it's called being built on the TV last night. You know, they're building a spaceport down in New Mexico.
Mm.
You know,
well, you know, we have an alien issue in New Mexico.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, the Roswell thing. So,
no,
you know,
sorry,
you and I have
more
talked
political than that.
You and I have talked a bit about, you know, the virtual stuff is fantastic, but it is in another way unsatisfying, that there is a limit to what the virtual world can give you compared to the real. You do hit a limit. So I spend a lot of time trying to make sure that Jack is still grounded in the real world. You know, we go up in the mountains, I make sure he's playing sport, you know, all those sort of things, so that he's not completely getting lost in the virtual, because I think that's insubstantial. But the technology will still just have a staggering effect on his life. You know, he had suspected whooping cough, and so we had to quarantine him for a week. Well, that was no big deal, because he could still talk to all his mates. He still played with them as much as he ever did. It didn't actually interrupt his life one little beat, that he actually couldn't physically see them at all for a week.
18 months ago, I was engaged to be married early on in my personal life, and my ex came up with her son to live with us for a while. They were sorting some things out, and he was a 12-year-old kid. You know, I don't see many 12-year-old kids. I mean, I have dogs; they're less work. And I said to him, I was really concerned. So I was, buying him things the first few days, making sure he felt comfortable and everything. So finally I said, are you worried about your friends and stuff? And he goes, everybody I know is on Xbox. And I literally, my jaw kind of dropped. I didn't quite understand what he meant. And then over the next week, he'd start disappearing and putting on this headset with it, and everyone he knows is everywhere. He doesn't know anyone in real space.
Yeah, I'd be worried if there's none in real space. That's that staying grounded as well. But Jack's got friends all over the world, just like I do through the Skeptic. I mean, that I could sit in a tiny little office in Pukerua Bay with 700 other houses and build the IT Skeptic into an international brand. I still sit back and boggle at that some days and think, how is that possible?
Well, the IT Skeptic is an international brand. Many people, sometimes wonder. For 4 years on Twitter and Facebook and all these other channels, and as I started to travel, people would say, gosh, our community is so small. Is this all? And I said, I stopped a while ago wondering if this is all, and started saying, this is all. And just being all inspired, because it's much bigger than we give it credit for. And your presence is felt at conferences that you don't attend. And that was unseen of or unheard of just a few years ago. We're going to be getting ready for Richard White here, but I want to thank you for being a part of the TFT 24-hour experience. Was your experience okay?
Hey, it was fantastic, and it's a fascinating exercise. All credit to you, mate, for doing it. We're all going to watch with interest and see where it goes. It's as fascinating as any new technological emergent, and good luck.
Thank you. And as I've said to a few speakers, I'm humbled to work with you. I'm humbled to call you a peer, and even more humbled to call you a very, very dear friend. So have a great day, Rob.
You too, mate. Good luck.
Thanks.
See you later. I'll watch the rest.